Rain streaked across the floor-to-ceiling windows of a towering Manhattan skyscraper, blurring the city lights into silver ribbons. 48 floors above the restless streets, the conference room was silent except for the soft ticking of an antique clock. Every seat around the polished walnut table was occupied by members of the Hawthorne family, all dressed in black, yet none of them appeared to be mourning. Their eyes weren't fixed on photographs of the late Victor Hawthorne, the legendary Wall Street investor whose instincts had built a financial empire. Instead, they were fixed on the thick leather briefcase resting beside the estate attorney. Everyone had come expecting the same thing: a fortune. The attorney slowly opened the briefcase, removed a sealed envelope bearing Victor's signature, and adjusted his glasses before speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, "Mr. Hawthorne left one final instruction. Each beneficiary may choose only one inheritance." A murmur swept through the room. The attorney placed two objects on the table. The first was exactly what everyone expected: a certified cashier's check worth $1 million. The second drew puzzled looks. It was an old wooden black king chess piece, its crown chipped, its base scratched, and a crack running down one side as though it had been discarded years ago. For a moment, no one spoke. Then laughter erupted. "Is this some kind of joke?" one cousin scoffed. Another shook his head. Who in their right mind would take that piece of firewood over $1 million? Across the table, Eleanor Hawthorne, the protagonist's sharp-tongued stepmother, smirked with unmistakable satisfaction. Without a second's hesitation, she reached toward the check. "Victor always admired intelligence," she said with a smug smile. "At least he made this decision easy." The room filled with approving chuckles. Only one person remained silent. Emily lowered her eyes to the broken black king. Something about it felt deliberate. Victor had been obsessed with chess, always insisting that the strongest move was rarely the obvious one. As Eleanor confidently wrapped her fingers around the $1 million check, Emily reached for the cracked wooden chess piece instead. The laughter stopped. Every face in the room turned toward her in disbelief. Why would anyone willingly walk away from $1 million for a broken piece of wood? The silence that followed Emily's decision was quickly shattered by another round of laughter. "You've always been hopeless," Eleanor sneered, folding her arms. "I knew you'd make the wrong choice." Several relatives nodded in agreement, their mocking smiles as familiar to Emily as the city skyline outside the windows. She had seen those expressions for years, not just today, but every time she chose kindness over conflict. Her fingers tightened around the worn black king. The weight of the little wooden piece brought back memories far more valuable than anything sitting on the conference table. While the rest of the family enjoyed luxury vacations, lavish parties, and expensive dinners funded by Victor Hawthorne's fortune, Emily had spent countless nights beside his hospital bed. She remembered helping him through endless rounds of treatment, reading newspapers aloud when his eyesight weakened, and quietly playing chess with him when speaking became too exhausting. Not once had she asked about his money. Not once had she questioned his will. Yet the family had already decided she had an ulterior motive. Whenever she visited the penthouse, whispered conversations stopped as she entered the room. "She's only here because she's waiting for him to die," one cousin had muttered. "She's manipulating him," another had insisted. Even Eleanor never missed an opportunity to poison Victor's reputation of Emily. "You've fooled an old man," she would say, "but you won't fool the rest of us." Victor had heard those accusations more than once. Instead of arguing, he would simply smile, move a chess piece across the board, and tell Emily, "People reveal themselves when they think no one's watching." Back in the attorney's office, Eleanor proudly held the $1 million check for everyone to admire, wearing the triumphant smile of someone convinced she had finally won. Emily looked down at the cracked black king instead. If Victor had taught her anything, it was that the loudest move on the board was rarely the smartest one. Somewhere beneath the surface of this impossible choice, she felt certain he had hidden one final lesson. The attorney waited patiently until the laughter faded. Then, with deliberate care, he unfolded another page from Victor Hawthorne's handwritten instructions. "There is one final message," he announced. The room fell silent. "If you're hearing these words," the attorney began reading, then my final game has already begun. Throughout my life, people believed my greatest success came from predicting the stock market. They were wrong. My greatest success came from predicting people. Emily looked down at the cracked black king resting quietly in her hands. The attorney continued. Every important lesson I ever learned could be explained on a chessboard. Wealth is temporary. Reputation changes. Markets rise and fall. But character reveals itself the moment an easy move is placed beside the right one. A few relatives exchanged impatient glances. Eleanor rolled her eyes. Can we skip the philosophy? She muttered. Some of us have businesses to run. The attorney ignored the interruption. Most people lose because they chase the obvious move, Victor wrote. The smartest move is often the one everyone else laughs at. For the first time since entering the room, the laughter disappeared completely. Emily's mind drifted back to Victor's private office. On the corner of his massive oak desk, beside framed family photographs and market reports, sat the very same black king chess piece. It had always been there. Through every business meeting, every holiday dinner, every hospital visit, no one had ever questioned it. Visitors assumed it was nothing more than an old decoration, a reminder of Victor's love for chess. But now Emily wondered if it had been something else entirely, something he had deliberately kept within sight for decades. As the attorney carefully folded the letter, his eyes settled on the wooden chess piece in Emily's hands. A faint, knowing smile crossed his face. Victor Hawthorne had spent a lifetime planning his final move. The only question left was whether anyone had been clever enough to understand it. Without another moment of hesitation, Eleanor pulled the $1 million cashier's check toward herself. I think we've wasted enough time, she declared, uncapping the silver fountain pen the attorney had placed on the table. I'll take the money. With a confident flourish, she signed her name across the acceptance form. One by one, the other relatives followed. Victor's nephews eagerly reached for their checks. A cousin whispered, "Easiest $1 million I've ever made." Another laughed. Only a fool would walk away from guaranteed money. The atmosphere transformed into quiet celebration. Smiles spread around the room as each signed document was exchanged for a crisp cashier's check worth $1 million. Only one envelope remained unopened. The attorney slowly turned toward Emily. And your decision? Every pair of eyes settled on her. Emily glanced at the check lying untouched before her. $1 million could erase every debt she had, buy a home, and change her life overnight. Then she looked at the cracked black king. Victor's words echoed in her mind. Most people lose because they chase the obvious move. Taking a slow breath, she pushed the check away. I'll take the chess piece. The room froze. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Then the laughter exploded. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, shaking her head with open contempt. I knew it, she scoffed. You've always been stupid. Several relatives chuckled. You really are desperate, one cousin added. Is this your way of proving you're special? Another smirked. No sane person would choose a broken toy over $1 million. Eleanor's smile turned cruel.
Pathetic, she said.
After everything you've done to get close to Victor, this is all you walk away with. She looked around the room before delivering her final insult. Honestly, I think she's mentally unstable. The laughter returned even louder than before. Emily said nothing. She simply wrapped her fingers around the worn wooden king and held it close. Across the table, the attorney remained perfectly still. He neither defended her nor acknowledged the insults. But as Emily rose to leave, she noticed something unusual. For the briefest moment, the attorney lowered his eyes to the cracked chess piece and almost imperceptibly nodded. It was so subtle that no one else noticed. Emily couldn't explain why, but that silent gesture told her she had just made the right move. By the time Emily reached her small apartment, Manhattan's skyline had disappeared behind a curtain of rain. The laughter from the estate reading still echoed in her mind, but inside the quiet room, there were no mocking voices, only questions. She placed the cracked black king on her kitchen table beneath the warm glow of a desk lamp. For several minutes, she simply stared at it. Years ago, Victor had taught her never to dismiss an object simply because it looked ordinary. The best hiding place, he had once said during a chess match, is the one everyone can already see. Turning the chess piece slowly between her fingers, Emily noticed something she hadn't seen before. It felt heavier than it should. Not by much, but enough to make her pause. She ran her thumb across the weathered wood. Beneath the worn finish were faint circular scratches, almost invisible unless the light struck them at just the right angle. Curious, she flipped the piece upside down. The faded felt covering the base had begun to peel away with age. Carefully lifting one edge, she discovered something impossible. Hidden beneath the felt was an impossibly thin ring of microscopic screw threads. Her heartbeat quickened. This wasn't a simple chess piece. It had been engineered. Emily hurried to a drawer and removed the precision jeweler's toolkit Victor had given her years earlier after teaching her how to restore antique chess sets. Selecting the smallest screwdriver, she gently turned the hidden mechanism. One rotation, then another. A soft metallic click broke the silence. The base separated from the wooden body. Inside was no pile of cash, no folded document, and no glittering gemstone. Instead, resting in a perfectly fitted compartment, lay a sleek platinum key card no larger than a credit card. Its polished surface reflected the lamplight like liquid silver. Across the center, microscopic lettering had been laser engraved with a set of geographic coordinates. Beneath them were only 2 words. Emily turned the card over. Blank.
No logo. No instructions. No explanation.
Only another mystery. Somewhere in Manhattan, Victor Hawthorne had left one final door waiting to be unlocked. For days past, Emily spent every spare moment studying the platinum key card, searching maps, old financial records, and Victor's journals for any mention of Level 0. Every clue seemed to lead deeper into mystery. Then, just before noon on the 5th day, her phone buzzed. It was a message from one of Victor's former housekeepers. Emily switched on the television. Luxury cars were being loaded onto tow trucks outside the Hawthorne estate. Reporters crowded the front gates, while sheriff's deputies carried boxes of financial records from the mansion. The headline flashing across the screen was impossible to ignore. At nearly the same moment, Eleanor's world was falling apart. She had barely finished her morning coffee when 3 certified legal notices arrived at the mansion. The first came from the estate's legal team. The second was from federal tax authorities. The third was a demand from a consortium of international creditors. Confused, Eleanor frantically called the attorney. "There has to be some mistake," she shouted. "I inherited money, not debt." The attorney's calm voice never changed. "There is no mistake, Mrs. Hawthorne." He instructed her to reread the inheritance agreement. Buried within dozens of pages of legal language was a single clause almost everyone had ignored. By accepting the $1 million cashier's check, each beneficiary had also agreed to assume a proportional share of the estate's undisclosed financial liabilities. Victor had anticipated that no one blinded by easy money would read the fine print. Within hours, the consequences arrived like falling dominoes. Bank accounts were frozen. Credit lines vanished. Lawsuits flooded in. Creditors demanded immediate payment. By the end of the week, the Hawthorne mansion, the symbol of the family's wealth for 3 generations, had entered foreclosure proceedings. The relatives who had celebrated only days earlier now turned on one another, each insisting someone else should bear the blame. Across the city, Emily quietly placed the platinum key card back into its case. Victor hadn't designed an inheritance. He had designed a test. And for the first time, Emily realized the real game had only just begun. The coordinates engraved on the platinum key card led Emily to the oldest corner of Lower Manhattan, where towering glass skyscrapers stood beside weathered stone buildings that had survived more than a century of financial history. Nothing about the location seemed unusual. Office workers hurried along the sidewalks. Tourists snapped photographs of the famous streets, and the constant sound of traffic echoed between the buildings. Yet Victor had hidden something here. Emily crossed the street and stopped in front of an aging granite building whose faded brass plaque bore no company name, only the year 1891. The massive oak doors were locked. There was no reception desk. No directory. No sign that anyone still worked inside. Remembering Victor's habit of leaving clues instead of instructions, she slipped the platinum key card into a narrow slot hidden beside the entrance. A quiet mechanical click answered her. The heavy doors unlocked. Inside, the bustling city disappeared. Dimly lit corridors stretched beneath polished stone arches, their walls lined with photographs of long-forgotten financiers and private banking families. The air carried the scent of old wood, cold steel, and history itself. As Emily followed the hallway deeper underground, an elderly man emerged from behind an iron security gate. His gray suit looked decades out of fashion, and a brass name badge simply read custodian. His eyes settled on the platinum card in Emily's hand. For several seconds, he didn't move. The color slowly drained from his face. With trembling fingers, he removed his glasses and examined the tiny engraved emblem etched into the corner of the card. His voice dropped to little more than a whisper. I haven't seen one of these in 30 years. Emily felt a chill run through her. You know what this is? The old man looked toward the empty corridor before answering, as if afraid someone might be listening. This isn't a bank access card, he murmured. It's an invitation. He stepped closer. Very few people even know this place exists. Then, he unlocked the iron gate. Follow me. Without another word, they disappeared into the forgotten tunnels beneath Wall Street, where Victor Hawthorne's final secret had been waiting in silence for decades. The elderly custodian led Emily through a maze of narrow stone passageways hidden deep beneath the streets of Lower Manhattan. With every step, the sounds of the city faded until only the echo of their footsteps remained. The tunnels felt untouched by time. Gas lamps, carefully preserved behind protective glass, still lined sections of the corridor. Brass pipes disappeared into ancient brick walls, while faded emblems of long-forgotten banking houses were carved into the stone above massive archways. This vault was built long before modern banks trusted computers, the custodian said quietly. Back then, trust was placed in secret. They reached the first security checkpoint. A circular steel door nearly 2 feet thick slowly rotated open with the groan of gears that had been maintained for generations. Beyond it waited another chamber. Then another. Each level demanded a different form of authentication. One required Victor's platinum key card. Another scanned Emily's fingerprint after confirming her identity through the estate records. A third chamber compared the card's microscopic engraving against an archive so old it existed only on engraved brass plates. Each successful checkpoint unlocked another piece of a mystery that seemed impossible by modern standards. Finally, they arrived before the largest door Emily had ever seen. It stretched from floor to ceiling, forged from dark steel reinforced with polished brass locking wheels. At its center was a single slot shaped precisely like the platinum card. Above it, etched into black marble, were 2 words. The custodian stepped back. No one enters alone, he whispered. Not unless they were chosen. Emily looked down at the card resting in her trembling hand. Taking a slow breath, she slid it into the waiting slot. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a deep metallic rumble shook the chamber. Ancient gears hidden inside the walls began turning with deliberate precision. Massive locking bolts withdrew one after another, echoing through the underground halls like distant thunder. The enormous door slowly drifted inward. A warm golden light spilled through the widening gap. Emily stood frozen at the threshold. Whatever Victor Hawthorne had hidden beyond that door had remained untouched for decades. Now, at last, the final move was waiting to be revealed. The massive vault door completed its slow journey inward with a thunderous echo that rolled through the underground chamber. Emily took one cautious step across the threshold. Then another. She stopped breathing. Stretching before her was a chamber unlike anything she had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling shelves of reinforced glass lined the walls, each illuminated by soft amber lights. Behind them rested perfectly stacked gold bullion, each bar stamped with official refinery seals and meticulously catalogued. There were hundreds, then thousands. The warm glow reflected across polished stone floors, transforming the entire chamber into a sea of liquid gold. Emily stood frozen, unable to comprehend the sheer scale of what Victor had hidden. "This," she whispered.
"Es impossible."
The elderly custodian smiled gently. "No," he replied, "just exceptionally well planned." At the center of the room stood an antique mahogany table. Unlike the gold surrounding it, the table held something far more personal: leather-bound ledgers, property deeds, ownership certificates, investment portfolios spanning decades. Every document had been carefully preserved, each bearing Victor Hawthorne's signature and proving unquestionable legal ownership of the hidden reserve. Resting on top of the stack was a single ivory envelope. Across the front, written in Victor's unmistakable handwriting, were just 3 words. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. "If you are reading this," it began, "then you made the only move that mattered." Tears filled her eyes. "Everyone believed I spent my life studying markets. The truth is, I spent my life studying people. Markets can be predicted. Human greed is even easier." Emily continued reading through blurred vision. The million-dollar checks were never the inheritance. They were the temptation. "I knew most would chase immediate wealth without asking what it truly cost. They would never stop long enough to question the obvious move." She looked around the vault, finally understanding why the Black King had remained on Victor's desk for so many years. It had never been a decoration. It had been the key. The final paragraphs carried the greatest lesson of all. Gold can be stolen. Money can disappear. Empires can collapse overnight. But wisdom, patience, and character create wealth that no one can ever take away. Emily carefully folded the letter against her heart. For the first time since Victor's passing, she realized his greatest inheritance wasn't measured in ounces of gold or millions of dollars. It was the faith he had placed in the one person who chose integrity over instant fortune. And at that moment, the final game of chess was over. Emily had won. Not because she was the smartest person in the room, but because she was the only one who refused to make the obvious move. Within days, the Hawthorne family's downfall became the talk of Manhattan's financial district. The same newspapers that had once celebrated Eleanor Hawthorne's glamorous lifestyle now splashed a very different headline across their front pages. Television crews gathered outside the estate from sunrise until nightfall, capturing every painful chapter of the collapse. One by one, the symbols of Eleanor's success disappeared. The sleek black limousine was towed away before breakfast. 2 imported sports cars followed that afternoon. Luxury furniture vanished beneath the hands of auction officials. Even the priceless artwork that Eleanor had proudly displayed for years was carefully wrapped and carried out of the mansion she had once ruled with unquestioned authority. The creditors showed no sympathy. Neither did the banks. Former business partners suddenly stopped answering her calls. The social circles that had welcomed her into exclusive charity galas and private dinners disappeared almost overnight. The people who had once praised her success now crossed the street to avoid being seen with her. For the first time in her life, Eleanor understood how quickly fortune could abandon those who built their identity upon it. Every cruel word she had spoken inside the attorney's office echoed back with painful clarity. "You've always been stupid, pathetic, mentally unstable." Those insults had been aimed at Emily. Now they lingered like ghosts inside the empty halls of the foreclosed mansion. Across the city, Emily remained remarkably quiet. She never gave interviews. She never celebrated publicly. She simply continued working with Victor's legal advisors, patiently following the instructions he had left behind. The contrast could not have been greater. Just 1 week earlier, Eleanor had proudly waved a $1 million cashier's check, convinced she had outsmarted everyone in the room. Emily had walked away carrying nothing more than a cracked wooden chess piece. Now the woman everyone had mocked possessed a fortune beyond imagination. And the woman who believed she had already won had lost everything before she ever realized the game had truly begun. 3 weeks after the foreclosure notice was finalized, the Hawthorne estate stood eerily silent. The once pristine gardens had begun to wither. The fountain in the circular driveway had stopped flowing, and the grand mansion that had hosted countless charity galas now sat behind locked gates, waiting for its new owner. Rumors spread quickly through Manhattan's business circles. A mysterious investor had purchased the entire estate at auction. No name had been released. No interviews had been given. Only one fact was certain. The sale had been completed in cash. When Eleanor and the remaining family members received a formal request to return to the property for one final meeting, they assumed the new owner wanted to discuss the transition. Perhaps a real estate developer. Perhaps another billionaire. They arrived dressed in their finest remaining clothes, hoping to salvage a shred of dignity. A sleek black sedan rolled slowly through the front gates. Every conversation stopped. The driver's door opened first, then the rear passenger door. A familiar pair of heels touched the stone driveway. Emily stepped out. She wore a tailored navy suit, carrying herself with a quiet confidence that needed no announcement. There were no expensive jewels, no bodyguards, no display of wealth, only a calm composure that spoke louder than any luxury ever could. For several long seconds, no one moved. Eleanor stared in disbelief. Her face drained of color. It can't be, she whispered. Emily met her gaze without anger or triumph. She simply smiled. The estate manager approached, carrying a leather portfolio. Ms. Emily Hawthorne, he said respectfully. All ownership documents have been finalized. He handed her the keys to the mansion. The same front door Eleanor had once walked through, as if she owned the world, now belonged to the woman she had laughed out of the attorney's office. Emily looked up at the house that had once been filled with painful memories. Today, it no longer represented rejection. It represented a promise fulfilled. Victor's final move had brought her home, not as an unwanted guest, but as the rightful owner of the place where everyone else believed she never belonged. The family stood in stunned silence as Emily looked across the familiar faces that had once mocked, dismissed, and underestimated her. No one spoke. The mansion's front lawn, once the setting for lavish celebrations, now felt like the final square on a chessboard where the last move had finally been played. Emily broke the silence. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, she said softly. Victor taught me that victory without dignity is just another kind of defeat. She nodded toward the estate manager, who handed each family member a neatly prepared envelope. Inside was an employment agreement, not a lawsuit, not an eviction notice, an opportunity. The estate is being restored, Emily continued. It will take people who know this property and are willing to care for it. If you choose to stay, you'll be employed as paid live-in groundskeepers and caretakers. You'll receive fair wages, comfortable housing, and the respect every honest worker deserves. She paused before adding one final condition. But respect goes both ways.
No insults. No manipulation. No greed.
If we work together, we do so as people, not as enemies. Several relatives looked at one another in disbelief. One cousin crumpled the contract and stormed toward the gates without a word. Another muttered that he would never work for Emily and disappeared behind him. But others remained. The years of pride had been replaced by quiet humility. One by one, they signed. Even Eleanor stood frozen, staring at the papers in her trembling hands. After a long silence, she lowered her eyes. For the first time since Emily had entered her life, there was no arrogance in her voice, only regret. I'm sorry, she whispered. Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she offered a small, sincere nod. Sometimes forgiveness didn't begin with words. It began with a choice. Months later, the Hawthorne estate flourished once again. The neglected gardens bloomed, the mansion welcomed visitors, and one entire wing was transformed into the Victor Hawthorne Foundation, funding scholarships for students studying finance, ethics, and public service, ensuring that future leaders would learn that success without integrity was never true success. Inside the restored library, beneath a glass display, rested the repaired Black King chess piece. It no longer looked broken. It looked complete. Every guest who asked about it heard the same story, not about hidden gold, but about the value of patience, character, and seeing beyond the obvious. And engraved on the brass plaque beneath it were Victor Hawthorne's final words. The greatest moves are never the obvious ones. And in the end, the final checkmate wasn't won with gold, it was won with character.